Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, September 13th. There was a point there where I was going to try and have the date pop up on the screen, but I guess I never finished that or got that working. Let's see, I just want to make 100% sure everything is working because I've spent a lot of wasted time over the past couple days in the times in which I wasn't wasn't sleeping, changing my OBS settings, moving things around, trying to better understand the difference between a scene and a profile. Seems like profiles are the internal settings of OBS, where scenes are just the external main front page of OBS. And so I was setting it up to make a way to stream on Twitch the YouTube Shorts or something like the YouTube Shorts. Twitch has Twitch clips, but at the moment it would be really a manual experience of going in there and clicking make a clip from every stream, because it inherently in Twitch comes from this way of thinking that the stream is the only thing that Twitch really cares about. Well, really, the chat is the only thing Twitch cares about. So first you make the stream, then you make a clip from the stream, which, without automating that process, for me, would just be ridiculous and a waste of time to go in there manually and try and clip things out. A big part of that, certainly, though, is just changing the canvas size. So instead of it being a vertical video of 1080 wide, 1920 tall, instead of 1920 wide and 1080 tall, which is usually what you get on a 1080p monitor, I doubled it so that there's actually two of those. And then by doubling the width of it and having two vertical videos next to each other streaming to Twitch, then I can just use an internal setting that will stretch that double width of 1080 times 2. It'll stretch that out or squish that down to 1080 times 1. So for every line, effectively, it's getting squished down and interpolated into one line, which isn't the best visuals ever, certainly on Twitch, but there's not particularly an easier way to do that and end up with a file that I can have FFmpeg crop out so it gets just the left side, the left half of the screen of the video, into the standard YouTube Shorts that you've seen so far. Now, a vast majority of that stuff, of getting to that point, that was me spending way too much time figuring out custom CSS code to change the way a Steam page looks to get the about this game information to display, which is basically information on the Steam page that's on the left column, where all the information I had collected for YouTube Shorts normally is on the right column. So as far as I can tell, there's not a super easy way, or probably not any way, to have custom CSS that would work in one swoop. So I'm having to use two different instances of the same web page, effectively, which, yeah, whatever. It doesn't really change much, but it did lead to spending a lot of extra time doing something that probably didn't even really matter. And in the end of the day, it really has only accomplished that my videos are now vertical when I'm looking at them and when they're being recorded, instead of being horizontal and rotated after the fact, and that the videos are now twice as wide. We have a new duel pass for 700 gold, so we'll buy that too. And let's see, do we have anything else? We're a little low on gold on Yu-Gi-Oh here, which is not super surprising, really. And I actually have quite a few secret packs that are just permanently unlocked. It definitely feels like Yu-Gi-Oh has finally decided to unlock more secret packs to try to increase people spending gems. It still really is not a good argument to buy secret packs or buy gold or do anything other than just be a free-to-play player, because they're not quite introducing enough cards that it feels like you need to buy new cards. They're not advertising new cards as these are brand new cards new to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So you need these cards because these are the cards that people in ranked are going to be playing. It's a very, very far away feeling compared to every time Hearthstone would release a new expansion in the old days, where they basically were releasing maybe 3 expansions per year, and there was a lot of advertisement and a lot of promotion around it. Let's see if there's anything new here. Yep, 1 new solo mode. I can deal with that later. And then we have this festival going on, Monster Type. So we're hoping we can do pretty quickly a lot of victories and get through all this. It'd be nice to get to 5,500, and then it's just all gravy after that. Let's see. Fire King deck is based on the concept of card destruction. Fire King monsters have the effect that can be activated by being destroyed and sent to the graveyard. You can use not only Fire King cards such as Fire King Island, but also combine them with cards such as Torrential Tribute to diversify your strategy. Among them, Fire King High Avatar Garunix is the powerful monster that, if destroyed by an effect and sent to the graveyard, will special summon itself from the graveyard on the next standby phase and destroy all other monsters on the field. Expertly wielded the power of immortality and win the duel by returning to life every time you're destroyed. Okay. So now we have a general idea of what to do with this loner deck, which is something I need to be better at reading so that I'm not just wasting time trying to figure out what these decks are all about. So other than wasting a lot of time with LBS and trying to make some YouTube shorts, which I still have some of that to do, I finished Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Yeah, I've already forgotten the name of the game. I think maybe is a game that gets a little bit better if you really want to commit to it and go back and try to do all the levels a second time, a third time. Particularly the missions, where the missions are... It's crazy that there's 3 very similar terms here, but like the missions are all over the place as far as what you're supposed to do. They're very much not the type of things that that are evenly balanced. Yeah, I guess that would be the best way to describe it. It's just like some missions are all about fighting monsters, some missions are all about gathering gold, some missions are all about fighting fruits, some missions are all about fighting boss fight characters. A lot of the main story missions have this natural aspect of progression that I think I probably overlooked a decent amount of because I just played too well on normal mode, which is the easy mode on Pikmin 3. I think I'm beating the game in like 22 days, 26 days. Really short amount of time. Generally, you kind of expect it to take about 30 days. And I think on easy, it's just too easy to not have to go back to locations 2 or 3 times to unlock more areas on the outskirts and build bridges and build platforms and things like that. And so, yeah. When I was done with all the missions, I actually started the game just to see how many tutorial levels there really were, which there's about the first 4 or 5 days are all tutorial, and it's a slow evolution really from the tutorial sections into the game proper where you have all the abilities or most of the abilities. In a lot of ways you probably don't really get all the abilities until you're just about ready to finish the game. And your experience would drastically differ in the fact that if you were really struggling to beat the bosses, then you won't get the items to expand the scanners to unlock the next area. So on the hardest mode, it very possibly is the case that you'll spend 4 or 5, 6 days in the exact same location. But if you beat the bosses quickly, you can kind of be done with an area, go unlock more features, unlock more Pikmin, and then come back to the areas later, because there's no way you're going to get, say, the water-based collectibles until you have the blue Pikmin, which you won't have the blue Pikmin until you're at the 3rd or 4th location. So it totally is logical, and inherently most people who are playing Pikmin probably should have already played Pikmin 1 or 2, so they should be definitely in that mindset of strategy and kind of knowing how to play these games more and better. So while it probably would be a little frustrating and a little bit of a challenge to beat the game on hard mode and unlock ultra spicy mode and play the game again on ultra spicy mode, but I could probably do that. Although the badge system to the like achievements on the Switch is terrible, because some of the badges and achievements are around playing with other people, plus the whole bingo system requires playing with somebody else. So a strategy game that inherently is pushing or forcing you to play with another player is odd, to say the least. Probably wrong-headed, to say more. But yeah, there's a slight divide there as I was wrapping up, in that I did have a little bit more desire to play the story mode because the story mode is so lackluster, but the whole deluxe edition DLC stuff, that is Fire King. Okay. Which one of these has the lowest attack? This one does. So if I just straight up do this, yeah, Pikmin 3 alone with its story mode is unacceptably short, and even with the side missions, which are kind of all over the place, and the and the... That's weird, I was expecting this to... say I could summon... more of these. I don't understand why I couldn't summon more of these. Weird. I was expecting to be able to summon this and just have a massive 3 team on the field, which is probably a terrible way to play anyways, but because it would eliminate any options in my hands. But yeah, if you like Pikmin 1 and 2, play Pikmin 3 Deluxe, obviously. If you haven't ever played Pikmin 1+2, maybe try it out once it's, particularly if you can get it used and cheap. It is a slightly weird real-time strategy, maybe a little bit too simplified real-time strategy game. Unfortunately, there really isn't a great non-Nintendo comparison. I'll finish playing with the Blob hopefully fairly soon, and then see if I can play the Slime Rancher game to see if that is somewhat close to it, but yeah, the idea of controlling characters and collecting things and taking it back to a nest, fairly lackluster. Overlord. The Overlord series is basically from, I think, the team that originally created Pikmin 1, and it is a similar thing where you're controlling evil goblins and sending them off to do tasks, and it has more of a fable fantasy adult nature to it. Unfortunately, I'd say Overlord though hasn't evolved into anything more. There's just Overlord 1 and 2, and then I think the company got bought out, or the THQ Nordic or somebody owned Overlord as an IP, and as such they made a mobile game or some third game that was full of microtransactions that nobody wanted and nobody cared about. And really, it actually may have been a Switch game, but that just hurt an already diminished franchise. So yeah, we haven't heard anything new from Overlord as a series lately. You could definitely make a new Overlord game, although I like the cutesiness of Pikmin, and I like the fact that you're collecting objects and taking them back, and your strategy is a little bit more simplified in that you know your main goal is to find objects and collect objects and take them back, and there's nothing else special to it. Whereas in Overlord, there was moral decisions and there was different activities, more interaction. It's just a little bit more complicated of a game. It takes the idea of Pikmin to the next level for edgelord teenagers, effectively, instead of being a E for everyone, baby's first real-time strategy. And then once you get to real-time strategy games like Command and Conquer, well, then you're just controlling so many people, and it's all around doing so many different things. It's not really fair comparison. Okay. I don't think that this card was perhaps supposed to be summoned the way I did it. Which means I can't really do anything here at the moment. And yeah, it's definitely worth pointing out that I'm very irritated on just how short the length of Nintendo games have been. Speaking of Nintendo, tomorrow is a Nintendo Direct. I heavily don't suspect that they're going to announce a new console, unless this is just some kind of sneak announcement for a new console coming out this Christmas, which I just don't believe that's really the case. But with the new president of Nintendo of Japan, anything is possible. The new Prime Minister of Japan just got rid of a bunch of his cabinet members and replaced a bunch of them with female cabinet women members, which, yeah, who knows what that means. It may mean nothing, it may mean something. In the end, it really doesn't probably change too much, but because it's still the same liberal Democratic Party in charge that's been in charge for, like, I think at least 19 years. Okay, so I think if I do this, what is this card's gonna do? When this card is XYZ summoned, it wasn't. So that effect. If a Bujin beast you control would be destroyed by a battle of a card effect, you can detach one instead of destroying that as monsters. This is the same way. I want that card destroyed. So then I can activate this. So I can special summon this to the hand. So I can win. And I really should be diversifying here and trying some of the other loner decks, but victories are victories. Let's just take the victories and go. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow's Nintendo Direct is fairly short and is more just about Super Mario Wonder and promoting video games that are potentially going to be out before the new year. My macro decided to run in a weird way. It's ran in the wrong window, so I'm kind of all over the place with that. I'll be able to make do, but there is actually quite a lot of news going on right now. In that, in part, I think people wanted to put out bits of news so that people wouldn't cover it. In the case of Unity changing its pricing policies, which we'll get to, alongside the iPhone 15 Pro announcement, or the Apple announcement in general, which Apple has announced an iPhone 15 Pro, which usually wouldn't be video game news at all, except for the fact that it did show off several games, and there's a better processor in it, and it does feel like this time around that they actually do have an interest in actually being a gaming platform. In this case, it seems like they're trying to be a gaming platform that plays regular AAA games in some smaller screen resolution, to the point where it feels like this is Apple pulling off its standard operating procedure that it often does, which is to not enter in a market really, or not care about markets and put any effort into them until it can surpass the standard and look really, really good. In this case, it would be a case where Apple has basically ignored Fortnite after kicking it from the store, and ignored all other mobile gaming games, not really caring about them, until it could say, hey, we're not going to do business with small independent developers of mobile games, and we're just going to jump straight into bed with the likes of Kojima and Capcom and show off their AAA games. Which, that is something, certainly. There's definitely a way to do it. That being said, you still have some major problems with the idea of gaming on iPhones. iPhones are very popular, but they're not popular as gaming devices, and they're popular amongst, I would say, a lot of kind of anti-game people that don't play video games much or just don't care about video games. There isn't that adventurous spirit, I guess is the best way to put it, in an Apple iPhone user, speaking generally, as there might be in an Android user. As someone who has an Android phone and who plays games on an Android phone, that is definitely a factor. The lewd gacha game that I'm trying out to replace Destiny Child, which is going to be done in 8 days now, just shut down. Tinka Fuma just updated, and in the way it updated, I had to go to their website and download an APK because it has nudity in it, and the Google Play Store doesn't allow for nudity in their games. Which I'm glad to see Tinka Fuma actually is putting out new content, because it was seemingly it seemed like it might be somewhat of a dead game. And it's from the Eros Labs website, and I'm half thinking maybe just signing up and pre-registering for one of the newest games and playing a newer game day one. That being said, I would have to actually make an account if I was going to do that. Now, does this destroy all cards, or does this only destroy So how is this going to work? I think we need to chain here. And then we'll summon 2 other people instead. He's clearly doing everything possible, but so he canceled that, that cancels that, that cancels that. Right. Well, whatever. We'll see what happens next. The iPhone 15 Pro has gotten rid of its switch on the side in favor of an action button, which I imagine that's probably cheaper. It's got several neural processing cores, and I believe more performance and efficiency cores in general. So it really does just feel like it's a powerhouse. I thought I was going to be able to summon this. And then they're pushing the camera, and then it has USB-C because they're forced into it, but not particularly the fastest USB-C power profile that it could download at. It's not doing like 75 watts of some of the other quick charge plugged in versions. Although the iPhone batteries tend to be kind of smaller than other phones anyways, other premium phones, and it's selling itself as all-day phone battery length is just an indication that we've really made no progress at all as far as having better batteries or more dense batteries that would last longer than a day. And all day now, 2-3 years down the line, we'll be charging your phone 4 or 5 times a day, which is really where I always end up. So yeah, at best I can say we potentially are at the beginning of a change of the norm between iPhones and video games, but it also isn't completely unprecedented that that there would be a couple of examples of really fancy games on the iPhone, and then Apple really doing nothing more. What Apple definitely didn't do is really talk about any kind of new pricing plans or focus or push for gaming. It's just showing off a bunch of tech demos, which might not mean much of anything. Bethesda has detailed Starfield's first update and upcoming features. It includes brightness and contrast controls, which that's not in the game already. A field of view slider, ultra-wide monitor support, and DLSS support, which there's already a mod for DLSS support, which it really should have had from day one. But that definitely is not a lot of updates. You can apparently also eat a button for food, which I assume is a clothing button. That might be a joke. You don't eat a button, you suck on a button if you're stranded in the desert to produce moisture in your mouth. I don't even know if that really works, but that's the old trick they would talk about. Okay. So we'll go ahead and summon this here. And that may just be all we actually need to do. They're also working hard, they say, on built-in mod support, which is not to say there aren't mods now, it's just to say that they're going to try and have a better integration to it, which may very well lead to paid mods and a mod marketplace, which again is questionable why Bethesda doesn't have that down pat too. Like, you'd think since Fallout and Skyrim have all been built on basically the same engine, and Skyrim at least has a paid marketplace for mod support. Why is that not all the same code? Why is that not being worked on day one? I guess it's nice though to see that they actually did work on the game instead of just working on marketplace, whereas Diablo more about having a marketplace and in-game storefronts. Seriously? Darn it. Saved himself. I don't know if that's going to save him for the long time, but maybe it will. But yeah. idea or the theoretical benefits of being owned by a big company like Microsoft would be that all of this code base would get integrated and shared amongst multiple stores, multiple programming companies and developers, and there would be just a Microsoft mod storefront mod integration that happens across Minecraft and Bethesda games, and to some point that is the Xbox Online services, but at the very least, because Bethesda's games are all on the same engine, it should be fairly easy. That's why mods are so commonplace and easy to do. Let's switch this up a bit. I'm not going to bother to read this one this time. We'll see how much worse I do by not understanding the trick is. But yeah. Now is the time more than ever with Embracer Group doing layoffs. Maybe Microsoft is just holding back before laying off a lot of the middle management at Bethesda for the Activision Blizzard merger to happen, but it definitely feels like we are either now or fairly quickly. It makes the best argument ever to get rid of the middle management at Bethesda in favor of more direct oversight and control by whoever would have been in charge of Xbox, which that was Major Nelson in the past. Okay. Go ahead and do this. I guess we'll take one and see what happens there. Probably nothing. Excuse me. Go ahead and add this so we can grab something big like this. We'll wait until next turn to do that. So, while most people will be talking about the iPhone situation, the Unity situation by far is the bigger news. And I think nothing highlights the anger more than this GameDeveloper.com article, as the Rust creator tells Unity to, quote, get effed as developers are left seething with new install fees. They basically got rid of a free tier and they are installing install fees, so every time your game is installed, Unity is going to charge some small amount of money, but not small enough of an amount of money for anybody to actually be able to afford it. I've seen some calculations on people who make cheap games or free-to-play games that would end up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars on this scheme for having a successful free-to-play game or a free 100% free game. Now the argument on it is ridiculous, but I could kind of see where Unity was coming from, in that they're saying, well, each time a Unity game is installed, the Unity runtime engine is being downloaded, so that's taking up bandwidth, and we need to support the development of the Unity engine and keep it going. Although in fairness, it's worth pointing out that I think a significant amount of Unity programmers have been laid off or quit from Unity over the past couple of years, as there was just a change in leadership, and there's been this growing greediness amongst Unity in general. But even if you were a Unity asset flipper, this system does not work for you at all. Inherently, DirectX, it would be a good comparison here. Every time you install a video game, you're either downloading DirectX directly or installing DirectX directly. For the most part, there's probably only 3 or 4 versions of DirectX that you need installed, really. Just 9, 10, and 11. I don't even know if there really is a 10. And there might be slight subversions that get installed. But if Microsoft was to make the argument that for every time any DirectX game was installed, they deserved even a fraction of a penny, that would be unacceptable. If Steam made the same argument to say every time a game was installed from Steam, they deserve a things. Downloading has always been effectively free. At the very most, the bandwidth costs were mostly put off on people paying for internet service, individuals. And whether it's legally right or not, for the most part, there's a high level of expectation when you do have the internet that you're going to get downloads in general for free. And some people take that to an extreme of downloading anything and everything, movies, video games, ROMs, things like that. Some people just assume when they go to a news site that it should be free. Like New York Times, things like that, and paywalls are highly controversial at that point. But yeah, I have never seen such fervor around a decision, and even if Unity does backpedal, which is it's probably trying to do a little bit without actually changing any of the actual legalese that they're changing the rules to, I'm not sure people will come back to it because people are already leaving Unity. Now this really sucks because this effectively means that you should go to the Godot engine now as your alternative to play using the Unreal Engine, or you should just go to the Unreal Engine, which might be a little bit more difficult to program for mobile gaming and things like that. That being said, the Resident Evil games and the games shown for the iPhone 15 are, I think, if not all, mostly Unreal Engine games, so I don't think that they generally yeah, I don't think a general Unreal Engine game would have that much trouble being implemented on iPhone 15 at least. I'm just not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing here, but it seems like I'm supposed to be sending things to the graveyard, so let's see what happens here. It's not like the Unity engine is 100% better. Though, it's kind of important to point that out. It's like we're just getting less and less good offers. And the last thing I can do is this. Let's just go ahead and take one of anything we have a lot of copies of. 10 graveyard cards. Not doing anything there. So yeah, I don't want to get too into the weeds of the pricing and the argument for the pricing, though, for Unity, it's easy enough to take a step back and go, well, this does not look good. This looks like this is Unity shooting itself in the head after years of already not doing the right thing, which all it really had to do is be a good number 2 competitor to the Unreal Engine, and it would stick around fairly easily, but I don't think it is. I think we very possibly are going to see a lot of people abandoning the Unity engine to go to Unreal, even if they're halfway through development, because these terms are just so bad. There may be a few people that are locked into using the Unity engine, and I guess that's what Unity is hoping, but I don't imagine that the only way you possibly even can have this kind of scheme in which they charge for every time the game is installed, a copy of the game is installed, is for Unity to have a fairly large amount of telemetry in which it's sending signals back to their servers every time a game is installed, which means the game would have to be online. You'd have to be online to install the game, which is not always needed and definitely not welcome. And it definitely opens up a weird situation where now an end user, perhaps an irate end user, could really screw over a small game creator, small developer, by just running up virtual machines and installing thousands of copies of the game to charge more money to that developer. And to that point, a major game has already said buy the game now because it's going to be delisted before these terms come into implementation. I forget the name of the game now, so maybe we'll see that article, maybe we won't. This is a story that's quickly developing, and it has a lot of reactions happening to it, although not really a lot of angles. It's like everybody is against Unity on this one. Side news story, Horizon Forbidden West Complete is reportedly coming to PC. Reliable Leaker says the game should be set for release within a month. Okay. It's crazy how Video Games Chronicle and most of the other people who covered Horizon Forbidden West are limited basically to the screenshots they last used. So here you have Alloy with the LGBTQIA colors all over her face because this screenshot was put out during that time, and this is with the thicker face models and uglier face models, if you want to call it that, which again I think that has something to do with the artist, but more to do with a poor system in which they face scan and light the models on the face scan. Inherently, if you were doing makeup on a actor for a movie, that was always a big issue too, is that once you've added a bunch of makeup to somebody, they look unnatural and bloated, and the best you could possibly do is have somebody that is unnaturally skinny to begin with, and then in a costume or makeup they would look somewhat more normal in proportions. Of course, everything now is probably done a lot more in CGI. Summon this. So if we can detach a material, and I can add something. See how many things we can move around here. Although, not sure how many things needed to be moved around. GameDeveloper.com has another story here. Techland has added a premium currency to Dying Light 2, quote, to make their lives easier. I assume they mean the developers' lives. With the new currency plans for Dying Light 2, Techland wants players to remain in the game itself and earn more revenue from cosmetic sales. So I don't see a big increase in people staying with Dying Light 2, if there really are even significant numbers at this point still playing Dying Light 2 because of them introducing premium currency. But they do want to, I guess, keep themselves alive and make more profit. It's never going to go over particularly well, but in all fairness, there was a lot of effort that seemed to go into making all of the extra content and DLC for Dying Light 1, to the point where they definitely should have made less content for Dying Light 1 and instead put some of that content in Dying Light 2. That way you would have had a better reception around Dying Light 2's initial launch. But yeah, people are not particularly excited around the launch of Dying Light 2. Guess we're bringing this out. And I think a big part of that comes down to the fact that there is just not as much of a zombie focus in Dying Light 2 either. It kind of more emphasizes and focuses around fighting for different factions, and it has perhaps too much of an influence from something like Last of Us. It didn't probably need to do that. But yeah, I can't think of any company adding a premium currency getting a hugely warm reception from that. Although in all fairness, there are some games that kind of obviously need premium currencies for them to work. Gacha games are built around premium currency and buying things to continue to have content supported for them. And in all fairness, like, even though my gacha game Destiny Child is being shut down in 8 days, it went for 5 years, and for the amount of content that they made, that's a massive amount of content for 5 years and a massive amount of support that you just don't typically see in any other game unless it is getting hugely reoccurring revenue through premium currencies. Yu-Gi-Oh! Great example. If Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have a premium currency, if you couldn't put any money in it at all, that would be crazy, because then even if I was paying $70 or $80 to buy Yu-Gi-Oh! The first year, they'd have no motivation to add more cards or add more features or polish anything up. So yeah, some games it just goes without question that they're built around those models, and a lot of games built around those models are terrible and only focused on those models. Gacha games again being a good example of that, but so yeah. Dying Light 2 is much more of a premium AAA feeling game, and it having premium currency doesn't quite feel good. It also leans on this thought that Dying Light 2 is actually more of a live service game or online game that would really benefit from having. Well, I'm probably not gonna win this one. Yeah. Dying Light 2 really isn't a live service game, so it really doesn't justify having premium currency. Starfield gonna get official mod support in 2024, Bethesda confirmed. We will do it in a big way because we love to. It's kind of crazy that they don't have it day one, since Skyrim and Fallout 4 both already have marketplaces and official mod supports. And I think it probably, particularly in Bethesda's case, benefits them to say, here's our official mods that we support, and these are the only ones we want to talk about and focus on, versus all the adult mods, say in Fallout and Skyrim. Like Bethesda games in particular, just notoriously having a huge amount of adult mods. Although pretty much any game with any mod support, first mods you're going to see is dozens, if not hundreds, of adult mods compared to a few field of view slider changes and things like that, which inherently points to the fact that there is an actual demand and desire for adult content in video games that is not being fulfilled, and that in part justifies my own slightly insane covering of adult games that come out on Steam. Is the same thing. There really is demand here. This isn't just a small subgroup of 30 people. Like, people are putting effort making mods for this and putting them out on platforms. Let's see. As part of Unity's attempt to push back, they put out a Marvel Snap content management on a heroic scale story, which honestly I think this was an article that came out a long time ago and they're just re-promoting it. That is showing off how Marvel Snap uses the Unity engine to make all its little animations. That being said, it's worth pointing out that the cards in Marvel Snap are not really interesting visually, and they're kind of lazily procedurally generated. And so this is a story talking about how they used Unity to lazily procedurally generate a lot of the animations in Marvel Snap. And on a technical level, that might be very interesting, but on a game consuming level, it is not a great example. I guess this must be a newer story, newer article, because that's a newer screenshot. I mean, title screen. Yeah. Crystal Dynamics is doing something fairly weird in that they are celebrating a Director of Quality Assurance, Andrew Horton, for celebrating 10 years at Crystal Dynamics. I'm tweeting that out. Game companies and publishers, game developers and publishers, are so allergic to the idea of giving any credit to any individual that it is sadly completely unheard of, really, to have people mentioned on even Twitter when they hit an anniversary or celebrated in any way. Yep. And yeah, I guess I could go on a bigger rant on that, but I think I will instead opt to just move on, because we've got a lot of news today. Apparently, either yesterday or today was National Video Games. September the 12th was yesterday, which is just, hey, let's have National Video Games Day be the day after 9/11, which I don't know why. National Video Games Day, who declared it that, or why they would have picked that day. Sure, there are special days, there's 3 or 4 special events. Yeah. Let's go ahead and just end the turn there. Sorry. I'm reading here. I'm trying to look up the history here. And immediately I have, is it actual National Video Games Day? It's not what you're playing, but yeah. So it's like there's contention even on that, it seems, as far as just but yeah, these are hashtag things. The Video Game History Foundation seems to have the answer. It's a bit of a roller coaster to begin with. Video Games Day, or National Video Games Day, as described by the foundation, is so poorly documented that the internet can't even agree on the date. Some sources saying it's July 8th, so others saying it's September 12th, which, yeah. Some websites even claim the days are 2 distinct holidays, and when you do digging, even on sites that are meant to explain the origins of the niche holidays, like this one, there just isn't an answer. But when the internet fails, they turn to paper. So they looked at archived magazines and newspapers. The Video Game History Foundation found several conflicting mentions of Video Games Day, but the earliest coming from the early 90s and mid 2000s. Some sources say it's September 12th, others say it's July 8th. One thing these sources actually agree upon is that it's a day where children can and should enjoy their gizmos and gadgets, and thank their parents for providing cartridges and quarters needed to indulge the enthusiasm. That is a quote from a July 7th, 1992 edition of the Hanover Evening Star. So yeah, seems to me that this National Video Games Day as a holiday is very, very poorly supported, and you don't have anybody like even the ESRB engaging with it. And noticeably, I don't even see a lot of people on Twitter or like Nintendo or Sega or Sony or Microsoft mentioning it if it was a big deal. The ESRB really should just form a different day, not September 12th. I could see September 12th being the National Video Games Day if it was the case that you made an argument that a bunch of kids played a lot of video games on the 12th because schools were canceled after 9/11, 2001. But yeah, I don't think that was really even the case. So I recall a lot of kids were very anxious and upset on September 12th, and we still didn't really even know what had happened on September 12th. Like, we didn't know it was terrorists, or exactly to the extent of who the terrorists were, what they wanted to do, or whether they were going to continue their attacks forever. But yeah, there I was hoping to find a Wikipedia article on all of this, but no Wikipedia article giving any real indication as to why they would say it's the 12th. In Jackbox Game is just using it as an excuse to promote people playing Jackbox, which is a fairly different type of yeah. And as far as like games coming out on September 12th, it would be interesting to figure out what games actually would have released on this day, but probably a lot of games have released on September 12th throughout the years. It's the fourth quarter, close to Christmas. According to this website, the 13th, let's go back to the 12th here. No, the 12th was also Ants on a Log Day, with raisins on peanut butter and celery, and Chocolate Milkshake Day, and Day of Encouragement, and National Police Women's Day, National Report Medicare Fraud Day, National United Nations Day for South-to-South Cooperation. South, I assume, meaning Africa. So, yeah, you've got like a ridiculous amount of holidays that all overlap, and let's just face it, the true holiday for video games is Christmas, by far. That is the most consumed capitalistic day of the year, only coming anywhere close to a child's individual birthday, as far as when they would actually get video games and purchase video games and play video games. So, make a lot more sense to just focus on Christmas. Black Friday, I suppose, is also a video games day. Inherently, video games, for the most part, are mostly single playable, or if they are multiplayer games, there's an audience at all times. So it wouldn't really accomplish much if there was a National Video Games Day in which all of the potential players of video games got together and played video games on one big day. And a lot of those holidays center around the idea of reminding people to do something they normally wouldn't do, whereas video games are so popular, it just doesn't make sense that you need to remind people to play video games. Moving on, this is an interesting story. Ubisoft has delayed X-Defiant after failing console certification, which this is the first time I feel like I've ever heard of a game failing console certification, so it must be in a particularly bad position, although I do think that at least Microsoft has also talked about increasing its requirements on console certifications and just being stricter. They're trying to probably push back from glitchy garbage releases which have plagued us in the past, such as Batman games and Cyberpunk games. But yeah, that's a big thing. As far as I skimmed, it looks like it failed either both Sony and Microsoft, or one of Sony and Microsoft, and they're not saying who. It was, they're gonna see if they can get a conditional pass. which unfortunately really has become much more of a negotiation as far as the certification processes for console games, and that companies like Ubisoft can just negotiate some features still being buggy on day one. But yeah, we need to see less of that, not more of that, and this is definitely not going to inspire confidence around X-Defiant, if you actually knew what X-Defiant was or cared about it. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says Roblox awards have been cancelled and a developer has been arrested after a, quote, security concern. Subheadline here: after the cancellation of the Roblox Innovation Awards, Roblox Corp stressed all attendees were safe and there was not how they wanted the RDC to end. What does RDC stand for? It's not Innovation Awards. Let's see. The arrest took place Saturday, September 9th at the Fort Mason National Park due to potential security concern. This is one developer for Roblox, and inherently that might mean nothing because Roblox kind of lets anybody be a developer. So, one crazy person that describes himself as a developer for Roblox was arrested due to the, quote, potential security concern, which seems to be posed by this developer. So it's like the developer threatened something. They canceled the annual Roblox Innovation Awards, which was meant to be held at the park. So the whole award ceremony was at the park, so it was pretty small in the first place, it feels like. Okay. So the guy was, I don't know. Like, why would you ever have an event at a park, though? It seems like it would just be too easy to plant things in the ground, bombs or drugs or weapons, bury them weeks earlier. Like, that's how people sneak booze into parks and events all the time. And certainly, even if you're not planting something in the ground, just being exposed in a park seems like a great way to have somebody try and sniper people, let alone just security. I think the first thing you want to do to secure any facility is limit the number of ways in and out of the place, and that is close to impossible in an open air park. We're doing really well here. And I think what I want to do is just take the victory now. Like, only a little bit of time. Now, in all fairness, this is not the super... It's only got about 12 days in which I can play this, but at this rate, seems like I could pretty easily get to this point, and then fairly easily get to this point. This just feels like one of those events where everything is going to be fairly easy, so you feel good about it. Meanwhile, we're still getting these super rare tickets, and then we have this whole festival, which we've already done all the normal summons, almost all the destroy summons, almost all of this, and that's having only dueled 8 times. I might potentially unlock all of this before I even get to like 15 duels. And that 100% has to do with just how long how lucky you are, really, as far as the loner decks go. If they give you good loner decks, you're in a good position. If they give you bad loner decks, you're going to struggle. And good and bad may be completely subjective based on how well you understand what the loner decks are and how they work. They have reprinted the Mist book, the Book of Atreus, which has been long since out of print. Which, yeah, probably should snap that up while it's still available. It's a hardcover, $35. It's pretty expensive. It's a pretty large book too. Let's see, 6 inches by 1 inch deep, thick, and then 9 inches tall. There are other versions and other Mist books potentially. I'm not sure which one this is, and I'm not sure if buying the Book of Atreus isn't one of 3 books that cover the entire story, novel versions of the Mist series. Which, yeah. Here's another Mist related book, From Mist to Riven, and you can see how big it is, and you can see that there's actually several Mist books. Clearly they have a certain level of love there for it. Actually, let's see if this works. So this Mist reader is 3 books in 1 volume. The Book of Atreus, the Book of Tiana, and the Book of Deny. Which, yeah. So buying the hardcover version of the Book of Atreus really is only buying one of them. And then this is the Book of Atreus separately, which this book doesn't feel 3 times as thick. And this is the Book of Tiana separately. And this is the Book of Deny separately. And Deny's fairly thick. So by making the book taller, they've been able to squeeze more text into it in this version. So it is a step back, certainly, to also come out with a hardback version of it. Although in all fairness, look at these paperback versions. Their spines are bent, and yeah, they look more red and damaged. I'm not sure if this book here actually is a narrative book, though. This may just be an art book. You would think that they would just release all 3 books though at once, even if you're going to sell them separately. Here's somebody playing Mist, real Mist on a Steam Deck. Let's see, do we have anything else here from Cyan worth mentioning? Here's somebody who's working on a art demo. The Cyan's creative director is working on something that shows where they are learning and teaching themselves to program. Interesting. Yeah. It is definitely a whole second generation of programmers, though at Cyan now. I'm still getting that audio clipping every now and then, which I don't know what that's all about when a page loads. Like, I've already underclocked my RAM turned up the CPU fan speed, GPU fan speed, and then turn up the CPU fan speed. It may very well be a case that I've got some kind of hardware optimization going on in OBS that really shouldn't be enabled. Or maybe I'm just pushing OBS a little too hard. I don't think I really am, but whatever. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has an article here saying a reshuffle at Dauntless developer Phoenix Labs has happened as the CEO and COO, Chief Executive Officer and Chief Operating Officer, stepped down. Having two of them step down at once definitely feels like something is probably amiss at Phoenix Labs. This is also news that came a few months after Phoenix Labs laid off around 30 employees after breaking away from the parent company, Garena. Yeah, so that doesn't sound like good news for Phoenix Labs, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens from that. Apparently, a blind player tried out Forza Motorsport's blind driving assist feature and won a race using it. This is obviously kind of a stunt feature in a lot of ways, but also a stunt that they are showing him. Now the problem with anybody saying they're blind is that there's legally blind, and then there's I have no eyeballs because I've ripped them out. I cannot see anything at all whatsoever. And a significant number of people who are legally blind, and in all fairness should call themselves blind, still have some small level of visible vision. So yeah, noticeably this guy says he's blind. Let's ask this very simple question. Why is he wearing glasses then? Someone who is purely 100 cannot see would not be wearing non-tinted glasses. Maybe if he was wearing tinted glasses to protect his eyeballs from drying out, because that is a concern, or so he doesn't accidentally stare at the sun, or to let people know he's blind, that would make some sense. But to just wear glasses, almost like they were safety goggles, like why would you even protect your eyes that much? So this guy looks to me totally like he's looking at a camera, and yeah. Why is he wearing glasses? Is that some kind of branding? So I don't want to watch this guy's whole YouTube video. Anyways, so I heavily question, though, if that guy's really 100% blind. Yeah. Let's see. Here it says, Sailor has nystagmus, a condition that results in repetitive and involuntary movements of the eyes, which affects his vision to the extent that he is legally blind. So he basically has perfect vision, or good vision. It's just his eyeballs move in different directions, which makes it hard for him to focus. There is a huge difference between going from 1 frame per second and 0 frames per second as far as vision goes. And so if his eyeballs are moving in the wrong in random directions, even potentially getting a few glimpses, the equivalent of a frame per second, is way different. But again, how many people are really going to be benefited by the developers putting extra focus in making blind driving assistant features? Driving racing games with blind assistance do make a lot of sense, I suppose, because yeah, I could see playing that and just trying to get something from that. Although inherently all you're going to get is a bunch of audio and probably repetitive engine noise, which I'm not sure how many players really want that in their game. This guy says it's not perfect, but it has a major steep learning curve, which, yeah. I can't help but feel like Microsoft, again, is just trying to get a cheap pop of advertisement by doing very little, or arguably maybe doing more than they should, but still too little to actually be helpful to people with disabilities. They are definitely trouting out disabled people as a way of advertising, more than they seem like they really are trying to improve the situation for people who are blind. And the situation is just going to be really bad for people who are blind as far as playing video games. The video is in the name. If you can't see the video, you should be playing audio games. A visual novel with a text-to-speech reader is going to by far return much better results and much more entertaining narrative and gameplay, well, maybe not so much gameplay, but narrative, to a blind person than Forza Motorsport is. You might as well, it makes an interesting challenge certainly to make a blind driving game where you focus on what do the announcers over the radio say in a NASCAR event, in a race car event. They talk about the cars passing each other, they talk about the lead car taking tight curves, things like that. So take those aspects that can be enjoyed by someone who's blind and make a whole game around that, so that even sighted people playing the game aren't really seeing anything and they're having to react and race based on the commentary being made. It would be fairly easy to make maybe a Mario Kart style game where all of a sudden it says someone's coming up on your right, and then you swing to the right to knock into them and knock them off the road, and a demolition derby type thing. Or there's a secret path on the left and then you swing to the left to go to the left, and take a secret path. That would be where you would start with that kind of idea. You start with a game that isn't built around visuals first, and make something new and innovative. You don't just try to patchwork on something to a game series that is not really designed in any way for blind people. And Forza Motorsport's a horrible example of that, really, because all Forza Motorsport and racing games have sold themselves on lately is that the cars look more and more realistic and prettier and just better graphics. The crowds and don't tend to look that good, but the foliage on the outside and the cars do. And they really don't have anything else to offer. So as the series goes, it's kind of the worst series to try and attract blind players to. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Picross S Plus has been announced. It will bring 9 3DS Picross E games to the Switch. The Picross E series was delisted following the 3DS shop's closure. Remember, the Picross developer also said it was getting harder and harder to get Nintendo to agree to collabs. And I guess it was easier to get Nintendo to allow them to just relist and resell games that have been removed from the 3DS. But the anniversary, I believe the 30th year anniversary for Picross is coming up, and it does seem like it is probably not likely to happen. Let's see. Censored Gaming pointed out something I totally missed here. The new Like a Dragon, the man who raised his name, is bringing back a feature of live action graphics for the girls in the Cabaret Club, which I still would very much argue is not actually a Cabaret Club minigame as much as it is a Hostess Bar minigame. Although even in that, it's a little weird that one of the things has the lady in a pool. I imagine these are Japanese gravure models who are somewhat recognizable. Gravure meaning they do fancier photo shoots and videos, and they're not doing full-on porn shoots, or like, but they still tend to be somewhat fancy dressed and somewhat lewd in their outfits, but not that much. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Assassin's Creed Mirage and recent Resident Evil games are coming to the new iPhone 15 Pro. Apple revealed its latest iPhone models on Tuesday. Mirage may not be on the Unreal Engine. The 15 Pro has a 6-core GPU and a faster neural engine, which I feel like half of the neural engine is probably through Face ID scanning technology and things like that, but it may also have some transistors built into it for like AI, ChatGPT type things, or even speeding up video games in some way. Although I'd almost think that the neural engine would be doing something like deep learning super sampling at most, and it probably wouldn't be even that good at that. Now, noticeably, if you did end up trying the game on the iPhone and the Apple Store, it would be a hard journey, certainly, to get enough games for that to make sense. Like, even if you get 2 Resident Evil games and Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Death Stranding was the other game that was announced, like, that's gotta tide you over probably for at least the first year. You're not gonna expect to see much more. What I would heavily suspect is going on here is that they have put a very powerful chip in the iPhones to test it out to eventually roll out with a new Apple TV, which it would make a lot more sense if a new Apple TV went heavy with video gaming and tried to act as a video game console of some sort. On that aspect, then you have bigger resolutions, and then you need more GPU processing. Remember, Apple is also trying very hard to not have any chips that it doesn't personally own all the patents and rights to, so it may very well just be testing out its new, I believe it's A17 chipset as a CPU GPU combo. Yeah, A17 Pro chip for some kind of Apple TV game console. And in particular, I wouldn't be surprised if, from the perspective of Apple TV not really being a big enough success for Apple, that they want to evolve it into being more of a gaming console that also happens to stream TV shows when Apple has a few shows to show. Amongst all the rumors of Borderlands developer Gearbox potentially being sold off, we have seen a fairly large amount of Borderlands tweets. Apparently they're also giving away a golden PS5 worth over 10,000. So, yeah. But that's not even what I was going to talk about. Borderlands 3 4th anniversary is today. Wow. Borderlands 3 has been out for 4 years. It really was not impactful enough. But yeah, they've been putting out more of these shift codes where they really had stopped doing that, or at least I'd stopped seeing them on Twitch. Xbox Game Pass, Xbox Gold Live has been shifted over starting tomorrow to Xbox Game Pass Core, and with that they have also put out the full list of the 36 games that are coming to Xbox Game Pass Core, which is probably the highlight, that there's a decent number of games that probably will never come to Core again because contracts and negotiations ran out, and or they were just too small or too old. So you have a full list here. Some of these pretty good as far as Among Us and Dead Cells and Fallout 4. Some of these maybe not so big a deal. Grounded, I'm not sure if that ever even came out of early access. How many of these are owned by Microsoft subsidiaries? Psychonauts 2 is, and Halo 5 Guardians and Halo Wars is, and Forza Horizon 4 I believe is, Doom Eternal is, Elder Scrolls Online is, Fable Anniversary is, Dishonored 2 is. So yeah, has a very short list though of games with the price increase of Xbox Game Pass Core being a thing. Although inherently they don't want you to own Core, they want you to own the premium Xbox Game Pass service. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article saying Unity tries to clarify the new install fee plans amid developer outcry. It estimates that about 10% of Unity developers will end up paying the fees. I don't know how it really estimates that, and it doesn't really matter what the actual legalese is or how it actually breaks down. It's 100% about the sentiment, and the sentiment is the problem, and people just don't like the way this was announced. They don't like that it was announced in the first place. Although in all fairness, if they had tried to slowly roll out announcements, it wouldn't have been any better. Yeah, Cult of the Lamb was the game. They're saying people to buy the game Cult of the Lamb because they're deleting it on January 1st. I wonder if this might have even been a case where the developer of Only Up got early information about this whole situation. But yeah, it does. That's probably not the case with Only Up. So I guess that puts me in a weird position here. Do I want to pay $25 to buy a game that then would not be available for people to purchase otherwise? Nope, I don't think so. I think we have to have a firm stance on I will not purchase games based on threats of games being deleted. Effectively, every game is out on some level of threat to be deleted. So, yeah. If this one does actually get deleted, oh well. Wasn't even though it is on my wish list, it's not like it was something that was really that interesting that I really wanted to play it. And there's several stories here that continue down this same narrative. Excuse me. The Death of Unity at GameDeveloper.com article here. If you're starting a new game project, do not use Unity. Yeah, here's a quote from Riccatello back when I think Riccatello was in charge. I'm not sure he still is. Um, this was them saying there was going to be no royalties and promoting Unity as the cheaper audience. Here we can skip down to the bottom. It says Unity is desperately digging its own grave in search for gold. This is all incredibly short-sighted and adds to a string of rash decisions and poorly thought through schemes from Unity across the last few years. It's no wonder that Riccatello sold 2,000 shares last week, which inherently that's also insider trading. Here we have another game company saying from Agro Crabs, the Unity, the engine we use to make our games, has announced they'll soon be taking a fee from developers for every copy of the game installed over a certain threshold, regardless of how the copy was obtained. Guess who has a somewhat highly anticipated game coming to Xbox Game Pass in 2024? That's right, it's us and a lot of other developers. That means another Crab's Treasure will be free to install for 25 million Game Pass subscribers. If a fraction of those users download our game, Unity could take a fee that puts an enormous dent on our income and threatens the sustainability of our business. And that's before we even think about sales on other platforms or pirated installs of our games, or even multiple installs by the same user. This decision puts us and countless other studios in a position where we might not be able to justify using Unity in the future titles. If these changes aren't rolled back, we will be heavily considering abandoning a wealth of Unity expertise we've accumulated over the years and starting from scratch in a new engine, which really is something we'd rather not do, although there is something to be said about programmers learning something new from scratch. On behalf of the development company, we're calling on Unity to reverse the latest in a string of short-sighted decisions that seem to prioritize shareholders over the product's actual users. And then, I effing hate it here. Seems unnecessary for considering how calm the rest of the long picture on Twitter is. But yeah, I think that pretty much summarizes everything I've heard. Overall, is everybody feels about the same. Let's see, what was it on Xbox that I was trying to highlight? Xbox retweets a lot of things there. On a side note, I saw that Major Nelson, Larry Herb, formerly known as Major Nelson, was saying that working at Microsoft was a really good experience, so, and a great place to work, which, okay, that doesn't fall in line with my theory that he was fired, but, and I definitely am of the opinion that Major Nelson was fired, but in all fairness, him being fired as a high-level manager may be a completely different experience than 99% of all the other employees at Microsoft. Anyways, here we have a Gematsu article showing off Death Stranding's director's cut coming to the iPhone 15 Pro in 2023. That's fairly early. But this also just really highlights the problems with trying to game on even a fairly big iPhone. I believe it's 6.1 or 6.5 inches across. You've got this cutout for the panel here, which I hate and always want to just put a black bar there anyways. You've got these rounded edges, and then you've just got no physical inputs or no grips. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, because it's USB-C, theoretically, all of these iPhones should have USB on-the-go capability, and you should be able to plug in a USB-C to HDMI or mini HDMI adapter and plug in your phone into a monitor and then get a bigger output that way. But I don't know if iPhone really has any kind of Samsung DeX type program in it. It probably doesn't, where you could plug in your phone and get a desktop like you can in Samsung DeX, and even that is really only Samsung DeX. I don't know if it has any kind of wireless AirPlay streaming service that would work for gaming. So maybe with USB-C you'll see more compatibility and more features come to the iPhone, but I imagine they'll slowly release a new version every year with just one new feature. And in a lot of ways this just feels like they were dragged kicking and screaming to have USB-C, and there's still a real thought that they're going to try to eventually just get rid of all the ports and have only wireless charging, and that they were hoping that they could get away with never implementing USB-C and just getting rid of the wired connector. Of course, the problem with wireless charging is you just can't debug a phone with wireless charging. If they could do that, if you could guarantee a connection always for data via wireless charging, then, or wireless something, you could get rid of the plug at the bottom. Still really wouldn't have it be 100% waterproof as a device. And the EU is arguably going to start forcing people to have replaceable batteries in smartphones too. So the next step is that any kind of idea of no connectors or a single unit that you can't open up and repair is going to go out the window with that aspect also. GameDeveloper.com says that Valve officially has launched Indonesian language support for Steam. The language has been added to the full desktop client and mobile app. This doesn't, I think, mean that games have not been available in Indonesian. It just means the application of Steam itself didn't support officially Indonesian. And in fact, even though we know there's 133 languages that you can select, it seems like that's the maximum on Steam. Only 29 languages are actually supported on the application itself. Yep. Unity, Twitter, is just trying to still smooth things over. And here is a standard operating thing that you'll see for software companies, that they'll try to get students in to learn how to use engines like Unity, so then they will potentially end up paying for Unity for the rest of their lives with new versions. And that's not going to work particularly well with Unity, because it's fairly easy to jump from Unity to Unreal Engine. It all kind of takes the same ideas from Blender and Microsoft Visual Studio, I guess, more than anything else. And apparently there's been some other kinds of confusion around DeviantArt, and they came out with a thing saying there's been some confusion regarding DeviantArt's policy relating to mature content. To provide clarity, no policy changes have been made regarding what types of mature content are allowed on DeviantArt, which the fact that mature content is allowed on DeviantArt is somewhat a miracle these days, as every other website has been pushed towards monetization and towards not having adult content. The bigger controversy that was more legitimate around DeviantArt was them trying to have their own AI image generation model based on DeviantArt posts that had already been posted to DeviantArt, which they eventually backpedaled on that, and I haven't heard too many people complaining about DeviantArt since that happened nearly 6 months ago. On this point, it seems like they were just investigating a bunch of just CSAM accounts that they were thinking child sexually explicit abusive material. Yeah, child sexually abusive material, CSAM. Which, yeah, particularly on DeviantArt, there's perhaps a line there that is not as well defined as you might think, because there is a significant amount of, say, nude photography and posing where people are showing off their muscles and their bodybuilding and their body in a very artistic way, in the same way that, say, the Mona Lisa or Leonardo's Da Vinci would show off their bodies. And so, yeah, there is actual art in a lot of DeviantArt stuff. It isn't just porn designed to be satisfactory or sexually gratifying. And to that extent, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some people pushing it and trying to do artistic photography of younger people, perhaps in inappropriate ways. The nude beach argument often runs into that too, is that if you're a family of nudists and you go to the nude beach and then you take a picture of your kids at the beach, normally that would be fine, but it's a nude beach, so then all of a sudden it gets a little bit iffier. Moving on, yeah, that really wasn't video game related at all. Lego 2K Drive developer Visual Concept has been hit with layoffs, which makes me suspect that either one, they know that this Lego 2K Drive game is not going to sell well, or not in a good position, or two, they just know they're not going to have anybody support it or develop any more content for it. I question the success of Lego 2K Drive just because it looked like there was a bunch of microtransactions in it from day one, and that as a Lego game it is definitely barely focusing on the Lego aspects, even more than the TT Lego games that barely focus on the Lego aspects in favor of telling narrative stories. But yeah, just having a racing game where the skins of the cars are made out of Legos is not that particularly interesting, even if they're wilder looking cars. That's one of the complaints around like the Lego video game version of the Lego movie, is that once the Lego movie is already parodying things in a Lego form, there's no second level of comedic parody to happen when you make a video game version, a Lego video game version of a Lego movie. Whereas Star Wars being parodied in Lego form is something that's new and hadn't been seen before, and so that's where it worked. I guess it's also important to point out that Visual Concepts is a 2K subsidiary behind WWE and NBA franchises, and this is cutting jobs in Austin, Texas office. I bet there isn't probably that much of a demand to make a new WWE. NBA games probably still need to be developed. Although in all fairness, that's like 3 different franchises for one company. That seems a lot of work. They may hand over those franchises to other 2K subsidiaries. Apparently the Tunic soundtrack was delisted after false DMCA strikes. Now I would argue as a content creator, most DMCA strikes are false. The DMCA is such a mess. Anyways, it just really plays towards that. We almost need more of this to happen so it becomes better known, and that there is an actual push amongst the voting public to push the lawmakers to change the DMCA and get rid of it. The DMC strikes can be deeply flawed, and now they're being used to wipe out composers Terrence Lee and Janice Kwan's music from streaming. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to get any real details here, though, as to who's really doing the strikes or what's really going on. There's basically no way to fight a DMCA other than to say sue me, and even then most streaming services still don't care. Seems like this is in particular Apple Music, and affects albums and tracks from Tunic, Fastfall, Umbra, and Undiscovery. Yeah. There might be another part of the story that we get more details on later, though, where it is some kind of publishing company or production company that claims they own it, or even the video game companies of Tunic saying they own the rights to the music, which at some level, the way this is being listed feels like the actual composers of the music were putting their music on these streaming services, when if they were work for hires, and it sucks that it is this way, but at least under the US copyright system, if they were working for the development company or the publishing company of Tunic, then the music should belong to that publishing company or the developer company. Usually the publishing company hands it over to the developer after a certain amount of time as far as the rights, but the rights never go to the actual composer of the music. And unfortunately there isn't enough protection or ideas around the idea of moral rights, or just artists or creatives owning even a small percentage of what they make, regardless if they are doing work for hire or not. There is this willful blindness to the fact that when somebody creates something artistic, music for instance, that's something that just exists forever, and it's something that probably comes from a finite amount of ideas in a human's mind. So if something can exist forever and it is taking away this priceless amount of creativity from creative people, that creative person probably should get paid for every sale constantly, which is the idea of royalties, but royalties have become a system really just of screwing over creators and not actually giving them any kind of realistic amount of income. Moving on, Blizzard apparently has banned over 250,000 Overwatch 2 cheaters since launch. This is from GameDeveloper.com, which a certain number, it almost feels like they've probably banned as many people as they have had legitimate players that they didn't consider banning, if not banning more people. Here's Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil Village coming to the iPhone 15 Pro in 2023. I almost wonder if some of these games end up streaming and this isn't really more of a bait and switch concept that's going on. Again, you can barely see the notch on this one. They picked a screenshot to try and blend it as much as possible, but I don't feel like Leon's head would be cut off normally in the game, and particularly in this case, Leon's gonna become zoomed out and rather small when you're actually playing the game instead of this cutscene. Like, otherwise you're just not going to be able to see the zombies and deal with them. Again, no controls here. So another thing the iPhone 15 interestingly has is its new wireless setup is Wi-Fi 6E, which almost nobody will ever get Wi-Fi 6E, the 6 gigahertz frequency is the E part of that. Nobody's going to get that and use that, and you really wouldn't need it for an iPhone anyways. It's just going to be way too fast of a connection that will drain your battery for no good reason. And it has Thread, which the wireless Thread standard being used for as one of the connection standards by Matter could be very interesting as to how much the iPhone 15 might connect to a smart home and smart home devices. It is uncertain. I didn't see if it's going to be a border gateway router or if it's just going to be an endpoint Thread device. It really wouldn't be that good as a border gateway router because you take your phone with you and it would leave your smart home. So it probably is just an endpoint device, and it's gonna come down to almost 100% programming as far as what it can do over Thread as a feature anyways. I mean, it'll probably have like Apple Home Key so you can unlock locks, smart locks on your front door, and it'll probably have Find My iPhone type things, but I don't know what else it really could have. It's not going to turn your phone into an alarm clock or a light bulb or a speaker, Bluetooth speaker. Probably not a Bluetooth speaker over Thread. It's not going to turn it into a light switch. So again, it would make a lot more sense if they were just testing out the Wi-Fi 6E and Thread circuitry, which would all be on the same chip, I'm sure, for a new Apple TV box. Which then, if it was a border gateway router on an Apple TV, like the current ones are smart home hubs of some sort. I don't think through Thread. I think it's through either Zigbee or Z-Wave in the current Apple TV setup. We'll just have to wait and see. YouTube creators here going crazy once again, in my opinion, saying a family member walks into a shot, do you edit around them? Frowny face, make them a co-star, smiley face with stars, or do something else? Tell us. Noticeably, there's only 117 comments here from September 11th, which is inherently saying, well, first choice is to ignore whether they want to be on your video or not, ignoring their privacy and consent. And YouTube clearly doesn't want you to pick that choice. Second one is making them enter into the YouTube content creator ecosystem and become a content creator, which maybe they don't want to, and you probably shouldn't encourage most people to do it. And frankly, I think a family member walking into a shot is probably going to be some underage kid in most cases. And then something else is just your standard YouTube. We don't even know what to post, so we're going to post nonsense. This is just another great example of where they didn't need to really tweet anything. They could have just waited till the 12th to tweet this, or focused on retweeting somebody else instead. I'm also getting fairly irritated, I'd say, with YouTube in general, because they continuously announce that new features are rolling out, and maybe my channel just has so many videos that it just doesn't get the updates fast, but I definitely have not gotten several updates. Like related videos on Shorts is supposedly supposed to be rolled out now. I'm not seeing it. Links in Shorts are the related videos on Shorts. I'm not seeing those. The path to the shorter path to becoming an affiliate was supposed to be rolled out. I'm not seeing that. So there's several features that I just am not seeing actually rolling out when they say things are rolled out, which, if anything, it does just kind of feel like they lie sometimes. They just, I think, straight up lie about when things come out. And I don't know if this isn't just a case of people at YouTube covering their own butts or pretending like they're doing more than they actually are, or that they're quicker than they actually are. Speaking of YouTube, they also were talking about how they were going to open their offices for public, like, public tours, which sounded like a crazy idea, considering that one YouTuber tried to shoot up the office just a few years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. There was also somebody who lost a lawsuit against YouTube because he wanted his videos back and he couldn't download them, which that's really a lawsuit that should have gone the other way. At the very least, you should force YouTube to maintain good records of all the videos of a YouTube channel for at least a reasonable amount of time of 6 months to several years. I would think that a lawyer could say, you must maintain all of these records and give us a copy as its evidence in our lawsuit going against you, but YouTube somehow managed to say, nope, we can just delete your videos and you can't use it as evidence as to why we deleted your videos. Of course, the person that lost was also one of those super right-wing conservative loony people, I think, so I don't know if the judge was given enough reason to want to listen to him, even though most judges are conservative too. Moving on to the regular news, a lot of this may be very repetitive. NBA 2K24 is currently the second worst reviewed Steam game ever. An underwhelming PC port means 2K Sports' latest is just behind Overwatch 2. So increasingly the bottom reviews here, based on wherever they're getting the worst reviewed games, which would mean the most amount of negative reviews, the race to the bottom is increasingly becoming full of recognizable games that seem to fairly well deserve it. Let's see. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty stream is coming this week with a surprise or two, according to Video Games Chronicles. Let's see, we already talked about this. New Spider-Man 2 screenshots show off Times Square in Brooklyn. Which, okay. And then Xbox launching a MasterCard credit card. What I didn't mention when covering this is that Sony had already launched like a Visa a year earlier, so both of them are doing it. I installed an extension to Firefox called CSS Override or something to use that to figure out how to better make my YouTube shorts. And I think when I installed that extension, it probably screwed up some of the other extensions, and that's caused my macro to run crazy, but whatever. I'll reset Firefox and everything will be fine. I disabled the extension after I was done with it. I'll use it again later. It's a lot like uBlock Origin with a very different focus and way less features. By default, if I wanted to get rid of something, I would just zap it with uBlock Origin. But that's more of a permanent ad block or content nuisance element blocking plugin with a lot more support, I'm sure. Video Games Chronicles says EA Sports Football Club 24's top-rated players have been revealed. 4 players share a 91 rating, which I'm sure that probably means something to people who follow football. Ubisoft's first-person shooter X Defiant has been delayed after failing console certification tests. The worst part about this, though, is just I see the screenshot and I've heard of X Defiant as a name, but I know nothing about the game and feel like this was a game that could easily have been announced and released 4 years ago, and I would have just paid no attention to it. Cyberpunk 2077 developers warn PC players to test their cooling systems before Phantom Liberty arrives. The update is expected to place a heavy load on CPUs. If anything, I think that's probably more of a joke, or just a testament to how unoptimized they expect the game to actually be. Right, and then that'll bring us to the Gamatsu articles. Let's see. Cosmic Shake coming to Xbox Series on October 16th alongside a free update. We talked about that. Infinity Strash, The Adventures of Dai, has details on the Temple of Recollection and the challenge mode. All this looks like old news. Like barely anything happened over Tuesday. Cyber Citizen Shockman 2, A New Menace, is coming to the PS5 and 4 and Xbox One and Series and Switch on September 22nd. Let's see. None of that says PC though. So, Shockman 2 looks a lot like it is inspired by early Mega Man games. A game called BXide or a company called BXide is going to exhibit an unannounced title for the PS5, Switch, and PC at the Tokyo Game Show 2023. This will be playable alongside Persia and the Magical Labyrinth Arabian Nights, NYAIGHTS, which I don't know if that is a pinball table or what. Nope, it is not a pinball table. There is a pinball table with a somewhat similar name, but that is not what it is. Arabian Nights. It's the Japanese word for cat. And here you have a cat girl in a chibi form merged with the word knights. Devil Engine Complete Edition for the PS4 and PS5 and the Xbox One and Series and Switch has been delayed to November 9th. Let's see. Devil Engine first launched in 2019 for Steam. It's a side-scrolling shooter game, which was rated very positively, but not my style of game, so nothing really needs to be done with that as far as putting it on the fall list. The side-scrolling robot action game The Scramble Vice has been announced for PC, coming out in 2024, which this is not a shoot-'em-up game, but a side-scrolling shooter. Definitely has that 90s anime feel to the style, but I don't know if I see anything that's particularly amazingly interesting. Generally speaking, I just don't know if this pixely flat 2D animation style works anymore. You'd almost expect it to be something where everything is now in 3D models, even if it is a side-scrolling shooter game, and everything does just have a more realistic visual style overall as far as the foreground and background elements. I'll make a YouTube short on that. Mercenaries Wings, The False Phoenix, and Mercenaries Saga series for PC launch October 12th. Western pricing has been announced. Steam pages for several different games, all here. This one we already have made a short on. This one I don't think I'd bother to make a short on. This one I don't think I'd bother to make a short on. And this one I don't think I'd bother to make a short on. So it's a whole series of probably old games getting re-released. One Piece's Pirate Warriors 4 DLC characters, the Battle of Onigashima pack and additional episode number 1 launched September 14th. If you want to check that out on Gematsu. RGG Summit Fall 2023 is set for September 20th. Now, my Korean game, Destiny Child, is ending basically at the same time the Tokyo Game Show is happening. So it could be interesting, I suppose, if there was some big twist and they announced a Destiny Child 2 or a reboot of Destiny Child or a more polished idea on that concept, but none of that's really likely to happen. Tencent owns the company Shift Up. Shift Up is working on a Project Nikkei as a mobile game and a AAA 3D hack and slash game called, I think, Stellar Blade. So the idea of them announcing a third project is pretty crazy, unless Tencent literally is shutting down the original game to hand over the license to another company and let some other company take it on. And even at that, you could just as easily rip off the concepts and do about the same. The art style was nice in Destiny Child. The writing was decent in Destiny Child. The gameplay was never really a focus. And the monetization was always a gacha game, so that wasn't great. So yeah, you could take the same concept easily. In fact, Tinkafuma is basically the exact same concept. In Tinkafuma, you're playing as a demon who is fighting to take over the world and constantly running into enemies. In Destiny Child, you're playing as a demon who's constantly being forced into fights he doesn't want to be in, with a bunch of enemies in a contest to potentially take over part of the world, or the underworld in the case of Destiny Child. It's the same concept always in a gacha game. You're the chosen one, and you're going to constantly be finding other people and adding more people to your harem / army. Moving on with Gematsu articles, Mortal Kombat 1 launch trailer and accessibility options have been announced. Which, okay, what's the accessibility options? Just to see how crazy they've gotten with it. Audio descriptions and cues for on-screen actions that play contextually during gameplay. That doesn't seem too crazy to me. I definitely feel like you could do a little bit better being blind playing Mortal Kombat and button mashing than you can driving a car. Inherently, do you even want to encourage blind people? Let's not think of adults here. If a kid is blind, legally blind, do you ever want to encourage that kid to think he could drive? Like, give them even that small bit of hope that they could drive? Like, you really shouldn't do it. Now, in fairness, at some point in the future, all cars will be automatic and that won't be a problem, but until we have auto-driving cars perfected, you just don't want to keep to encourage that. Whereas in a Mortal Kombat game, I guess you also don't want blind people to be encouraged to get into fights, but that's more fantastical. I'm not even a big fan of little kids getting the little remote battery powered cars, not remote controlled cars, but the little power wheel type things, or toys that look like cars that they can get in and drive. I think that just inevitably opens the door that you're going to be one of the few percentage of parents who find their kid has taken their keys and joyridden the car at the age of 6 or 7. You still, though, in being blind playing Mortal Kombat, are probably just going to button mash quite a bit, and audio cues can only help you so much. Moving on, Slave Zero X launches February 21st, 2024. It's a 2.5D side-scrolling character action game. Let's see. In all the work I worked on OBS, I didn't find a different audio file for the audio cue from when it's blurred, so when that kicks in, that'll still be exactly the same, which is fine. I did try to fix the WebPeak enabling itself, but I don't know what's even triggering it, really, because I didn't really change any of that, and yet it's not working now, or it's working too well, or it's activating when it shouldn't. I guess that's not working. The game called Bilkin's Folly launches October 2nd. I do wonder a lot of times in these live streams if I am making any sense. I do jump around quite a bit and don't speak in full context, and that is certainly another element. This might be something where I just don't know if I was live streaming on Twitch, if I could stay on topic and explain myself, or if I just have to constantly try to explain myself more, or people would just constantly not follow along. Football Manager 2024 has been announced for the PS5, Xbox One Series, Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. Which, yeah, PC seems to include Steam. That is a long list of different ways to play this game, but it is also a simplistic management game being published by Sega, so it's also relevant enough to get a YouTube short. Disgaea 7 Vows of the Virtueless demo for the PS4 and PS5 and Switch are now available in the West. I'm pretty sure the game is already... Nope, the game is not out? Wow. They've been promoting and talking about Disgaea heavily for nearly a year, and they kind of had stopped, so I thought they were done. Well, again, while this is a more niche game, it's relevant enough to get a YouTube short. And then Assassin's Creed Mirage coming to the iPhone 15. Again, one thing that might also be a bit of an issue on the iPhone, although it probably won't, is that the brightness may not be as bright as you like it to be. I know they came out with a new smartwatch that can lower the brightness on its screen very, very low, so you can be like in a movie and it won't be too bright, and you could actually turn it up very high. I think it was somewhere between 1 nit to 300 nits, and I don't know exactly how to quantify nits in my own mind. I know a lumen is the value of 1 candle, so I can think of that. I noticed when I was looking at the settings of OBS, there's some new settings to adjust the brightness of some streams, and there's also settings that they're working on the newest version of OBS to address surround sound. So there is a small possibility, I guess, that I might set up the recording to record in surround sound and hear the game in surround sound, but I don't know how I could quite do that when I have headphones on, nor do I know if it's really worth doing that when most people are going to listen either on a phone or with headphones on. They're not going to listen with a surround sound. It'd be fine if I could get the Pro Logic surround sound audio and the stereo audio in the video file, but I'm not sure you can do that with YouTube videos. It would just then be a case where there would be an alternate audio track that was surround sound that was being completely unmonitored by me. And I think in video games cases, very often the surround sound track will sound very different from the stereo track. Better or worse, will often be a coin flip. Let's see, Gungrave Gore Ultimate Edition, Ultimate Enhanced Edition has been announced for Switch. which, yeah, I don't know how enhanced anything can be on the Switch. And these visuals just don't line up with what I thought Gungrave Gore was. Yeah, they're definitely trying to hide things here, but just making the screen even smaller and having the edges here. Yeah, I think they probably are joking as far as the idea of it being an enhanced edition visually, although in all fairness, the original Gungrave Gore on whatever other consoles may not have been particularly good quality either. But yeah, this art style is much more, I think, in line with the anime and manga of Gungrave, not the 3D models that they're showing here. And apparently I just totally missed Gungrave Gore, because this totally should be on the wish list, and yet it isn't. Bit Trip Rerunner launches September 19th for PC. Available for $15.99 until September 26th. Yeah, I was watching another YouTuber, and he started talking, and then he messed up, and then he stopped, and then he started again. And obviously they were going to cut it out, and I've seen that with some other YouTubers. It doesn't happen anywhere as much as you might think, but I question the value in it, though. Sure, I am a stumbling fool who says the wrong thing and then stops and starts over again, but that's just a normal human being, who, particularly when you're talking for 4 hours on average, it's just not really worth it. Sure, I could agonize and spend 20 hours going over my videos, removing every and and every pause, and sound perfectly, but I just don't see the value in it. It's just not realistic. If you were to go listen to a speech from somebody, usually people have practiced their speeches over and over again, and they are reading off a teleprompter, so they don't mess up as much as, say, YouTube people in front of a camera kind of doing it live. But if somebody did mess up what they're saying, you just ignore it. Most people, I don't think, ever recognize that you say the wrong thing. And frankly, I find the people that are always listening for somebody to say the wrong thing to correct them to be incredible pains in the butt and annoying. And it really just highlights that they're not actually paying attention to what you're saying as far as the meaning and the context in it. So trying to target that audience that's just going to go actually or correct you, or you mispronounced that word, that kind of nonsense, like that's not the kind of fans I would want to have anyways. Moving on back to video game news. I'm getting off topic here, getting very ADD. The animation RPG Breakers Unlock the World has been announced for PC, iOS, and Android, which seems to have a fairly wide variety of art styles here. This reminds me a lot of the card game Shadowverse, in which it felt like in Shadowverse, and it feels like here, that they had at least 2 or 3 animators drawing character types from at least 2 or 3 different styles, or 2 or 3 different visual themes. You have like robots over here, and then you have a chibi elf girl here, and then you have a lewd, maybe succubus character here, and then flying cat. Then you have your traditional skinny boy, good looking anime boy, and then you have buff anime guy here. You have more of a kawaii art style, shorter character here, and then more just standard anime girl here. You've got the hair over the eyes anime girl here. Yandere, probably. Giant boob, bright and cheerful girl here, and then hair over the eyes anime guy here, and anime guy here. Even the logo, Breakers, looks very much similar to what Shadowverse looked like, although having a logo in the center and then words around it is somewhat standard, or a symbol in the center. That was the entirety of this teaser trailer. It was just the characters walking around. I really need to turn on the auto mute plug-in again, though. Like, either by default I need to mute what I'm hearing and then unmute it from OBS, which might be the right move. Yeah, let's just do that. That's the easiest thing to do. Just go ahead and mute that. So that won't change anything, or shouldn't change anything for anybody else, but it'll mean when I hit play on a video, I won't get blared out with a large audio, which will just cause me to pause and be distracted for a fraction of a second. Moving on with the Gematsu news, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising has Grimnir gameplay trailer if you want to check that out. Looks like it's another fighting game. Well, it's an action RPG / fighting game in which they're going to advertise a different character every now and then. The PlayStation 5 system software update is now available, adding new accessibility, audio, and social features and enhancements. Weirdly though, it's getting fairly late for them to come out with their accessibility controller. I know they announced it, but I don't think it's actually been put in the hands of anybody. And by this Christmas, there definitely should be an accessibility controller available. I'd almost buy one for myself, but I imagine it's going to be way too expensive and not really compatible with PC, although that may change. Steam was pushing the idea of Sony controllers being more integrated into PC gaming. PlayStation Remote Play support for additional Android devices, which really destroys the idea of the PlayStation Portal concept, in that Chromecast with Google TV 4K model, still probably your best bet. New voice command options. You can say, hey PlayStation help, and hey PlayStation what's new. That's not much. New PlayStation app enhancements. The apps for the PlayStation and Xbox seem to really, and the Steam app too, all the same. Like, they're apps that really don't seem like they do enough these days, and they need more features. They need to struggle to figure out what can you do with a phone app to integrate with your console. Can you browse the list of games that are installed on your console? Can you look at your achievements and your playtime and things like that? The second controller for assistance features nice. I hope the next Nintendo console has that as an idea too. Just by default, even if you're playing a single player game, you can either get assistance from another player or request assistance from another player using a second controller. There was a point, I think, also where PlayStation was going to have assistance online from a second player. System UI, haptic feedback, that seems like something that should have already been there. 3D audio, powered by Tintus. 3D audio can now be enjoyed on a compatible Dolby Atmos enabled HDMI device. Party UI updates, share screen previews, join friends game session easily, Game Hub tournaments, titles, reset to react to messages with emojis, search for games in your library. Games in your library search is probably way more valuable than some of these other things. Game help improvements. The game help improvements is trying to have a overall interface of hints instead of in-game hints, where some games have hints and a large majority of games wouldn't have hints. I kind of like the idea of having a single interface to look up hints instead of going to websites and having to Google it, but I'm not sure it's actually that needed or actually that well implemented. Discover new features, and then mute PlayStation 5 beep sound. You'd think again that should be something that would have been there day one. And you can now use larger capacities of M2 SSDs up to 8 terabytes, where previously it was a 4 terabyte limit, and I almost feel like these limitations really have more to do with just what's actually available for purchase more than what it could actually support. There's, as far as file system considerations, almost certainly no difference between a 4 terabyte limit and an 8 terabyte limit. The next maximum size limit for probably a 64-bit file allocation table is probably somewhere around 100 to 1,000 petabytes of data, so thousands upon thousands of or millions upon millions of terabytes, and we're just not going to be anywhere near that. Whereas I'm still hoping for a new technology to hold more space cheaper, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Level 5 announced its Tokyo Game Show 2023 schedule, which, yeah, it's kind of pointless to even follow the schedules of the Tokyo Game Show unless you're actually going to be there or you're actually going to watch the multiple streams, probably all of which will be in Japanese. We'll get the news when it happens, which that's true for almost all these events, is that it's just easier to wait a couple days, wait for your video game journalist of choice to tell you everything. Gamatsu is a great source, certainly, for the Tokyo Game Show. They will talk about every single game that's shown there of any merit. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1815 are out. Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons given 28 out of 40. Isekai Rondo given 29 out of 40. Lies of P given 34 out of 40. So they actually did like Lies of P fairly well. And then Level Up School Days given 30 out of 40. Well, it'll be interesting to see if Lies of P gets as good of a reception or even that much coverage when it in the West, which I assume it is either going to be out in the West in the next week or is already out. It weirdly does kind of feel like it just launched with not enough advertisement around it. Jagged Alliance 3 for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series launches November 16th. This is a game that's been on Steam since July 14th. So you can see not a ton of reviews, but they are very positive. Jagged Alliance is perhaps a slightly different style of XCOM clone that might have a slightly different feeling to it that makes it attractive. Or it might just be an XCOM clone. A fantasy fishing RPG called Whiskers Waters has been announced for the PS5, Switch, and PC. It's due out in early 2024. Let's see. Now, what makes it a fantasy fishing game is what I'd want to know. At some level, you're fishing as cats, which is cute. Seems like you have a bit of a village here, but it is an interesting twist from something like Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon, where you're running around farming. The actual fish that you're catching might be fictional too. Stratolapia is a tilapia, so straight tilapia. Light fantasy with the art of fishing into a mesmerizing world. That's an interesting idea. I almost feel like fishing games, because they're more laid back, should be mobile games first, though. It's fishing inherently implies to me you're going to put a lot of time into it, and anything that is going to be a laid-back fishing experience probably is better on a mobile platform, a smartphone. Like, I could see playing. I've tried a couple fishing games on my smartphone and gotten somewhat into them, but not that much into them. Fishing is also inherently fairly boring. But yeah, there was I don't know if the, what is it, Magikarp Jump Pokemon game really is a fishing game to say. I would say that's probably not a fishing game, but yeah, I couldn't name the other two that were more fishing games. Moving on, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader launches December 7th for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. So, yet another Warhammer game, which Warhammer, as a tabletop game, has so much relevancy to it that, or as a niche, I guess, tabletop game, that I always feel like I should cover these games, but in reality, Warhammer and Warhammer 40k video games never sell well. They never deliver on any real promise. I feel like it is just a case, much like how there aren't any good Dungeons and Dragons games worth mentioning in video game format, that it just doesn't translate. The hype and the imagination that you have when playing a tabletop game is just so much higher than what any game developer can afford to do in turning it into a video game. Although, in all fairness, if I was Activision Blizzard, I would call Hasbro up and say, hey, let's license Dungeons and Dragons and let's make a new Warcraft game using the Dungeons and Dragons characters and art style. Or some other company doing something similar. Like, you could take existing styles of games, put Dungeons and Dragons art style on it, and it would work fairly well. Gearbox almost certainly could say, hey, let's make a Dungeons and Dragons style Borderlands. We just have to figure out how to get around the shooting aspect. Although Gearbox would also do fairly well to make a Warhammer 40k shooting game anyways, using that art style. Moving on, Rainbow Cotton is coming to the PS4 and PS5, the Xbox One, the Switch, and the PC in the spring of 2024, which doesn't seem like they have a Steam link for it ever. And Rainbow Cotton is, which shooting, it's a side-scrolling shooting game that's actually not a side-scrolling shooter. In this case, it's more of a 3D riding on a witch broom shooter. There's, I think, several Rainbow Cotton games or Rainbow games out there. It's an older series than it you might think. It's a remastered version of a 3D shoot 'em up for the PlayStation 5. Yeah, it was first released in the Dreamcast in 2000. And then the Nintendo Direct is set for tomorrow. We'll see what is said in this 40 minutes. Metroid Prime 4, I mean, should be announced and be out now. Otherwise, it is going to be a lot of Mario Wonder and some of the other Mario games that were announced. And that'll be it. And then we talked about this Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba Sweep the Board is coming to the West in 2024. I don't know if we talked about it coming to the West last time though, or if we just talked about the game being announced. Which, as somebody who can't cover Nintendo games because of YouTube, Nintendo copyright claiming them, there is a real argument to potentially play this as a Mario Party clone. Although in all fairness, if it is just a Mario Party clone, that's not going to work very well for me, as I'll be playing it by myself, which wouldn't work. And then that brings us to GameDeveloper.com articles, which we probably talked about it. The Godot engine, in contrast to all the controversy around the Unity engine, has launched a funding initiative to fuel long-term growth. Godot enters the subscription service game so it can bring on more staff and make the best possible Godot engine. You'd almost wonder if the Godot engine is attempting to really be a open source version of the Unity engine or the Unreal engine, or a real competitor to it. I would love to see that happen. It is an open source game development tool. But just because open source is the best way, in my opinion, doesn't mean it's the way that ever really succeeds. But yeah, probably the best day ever for the Godot engine to launch a funding initiative. I don't know if you're... I don't know how much of this they really are even forcing you to pay, though. Some of this may straight up just be donation levels, Kickstarter type stuff, as far as membership tiers. It says there's a platform fee, so even though it's open source, it feels like you may still end up paying to use the Godot engine, which, in all fairness, you probably should be paying to use some engine. The main thing, though, I would want to see, and if we can do a brief bit of research here, just go to the Godot engine's website and see what they brag about as far as games that have been made for it. See, it uses language like C++, C#, and GD script, which I don't know what GD script is. Ideally, I'd like to see them embrace Rust. It works on websites like Steam and Epic and Itch and HTML5 and WebAssembly and Android and BSD, and I assume that means also Linux and macOS and Windows, Android and iOS. So it's got pretty much everything. VR headsets. The screenshots here, while it's not as pretty as Unreal Engine or Unity, it's basically the same concepts as far as visually connecting elements. The Godot script is probably this, whereas the C++ is more like this. Although this isn't C++ because there's no semicolon here. It's maybe C#. Or maybe this is GD script. Yep. Trying to figure out what games have used it though. Notable games made with Godot: Deponia, the point-and-click adventure. Another point-and-click adventure game. Sonic Colors Ultimate. Interesting. Yeah, that's not a particularly long list though of engine of games. And even if you look at the developers here, that's not a particularly long list of games. So I don't know if Godot really is going to be the engine to use. Let's see, year release scripting, which you could sort by popularity. as far as engines. Looking here though, you can see there's a fairly long list of different engines that have been created. Things like the Cry engine for Crisis. Yeah, you'd be best actually looking at notable games here. As far as, do you even recognize this? On these games, although a lot of these links are just saying list, so there's a whole list there, which that's not very helpful in the chart to say click here to see more. The creation engine is Skyrim, Fallout, and that's the proprietary engine. Cry engine is Crisis, and Far Cry is a proprietary engine. A lot of these were proprietary engines. This one's got too many things to hover over. Most of these engines are not worth talking about. I'd say the Godot engine is barely worth talking about just because Unity has screwed things up, whereas the vast majority of these games are not actually that relevant. Genie engine, proprietary for Age of Empires games, and who knows if a lot of these games aren't re-released on different versions of those engines that are completely different and just have the same name. id Tech, notable for doing a bunch of its proprietary games, although it actually is, id Tech is not a proprietary engine, it's an open source engine itself. But noticeably there's different numbers here, and as the numbers go up you start to see fairly big differences in what is being made. Doom 3 BFG edition in id Tech 4.5 is fairly different from Wolfenstein: The New Order and Rage. And I assume the Doom reboot of 2016 is even fairly different from id Tech 5. And only Doom Eternal, noticeably also, id Tech 5, 6, and 7 went proprietary, which, yeah. So basically id Tech 4.5 is the last time that id Tech really was id Tech, and then the rest of this is a different engine using the same name. And certainly there's like point and click adventures like Monkey Island 3's iMuse system that, again, aren't used by enough. Notably here, there's a lot of things that don't even have a single notable game listed, and very few of these engines that have even a decent amount of games mentioned. Final Fantasy 15 on the Luminous engine, and you probably aren't going to see any engines mentioned at all for any Nintendo games in particular. I don't think Nintendo gives out that information, and that may be the case for a lot of game developers anyways, is that there's secrecy to even that level. Vampire Survivors on a Phaser MIT licensed JavaScript engine. Noticeably, Unreal and Unity at the bottom of the list, just alphabetically. Roblox is on its own Roblox engine. RPG Maker has a fairly long list of games to be mentioned, which, yeah, you really can't make games on the RPG Maker that aren't RPGs. ScumVM has a whole category of ScumVM games. Not relevant really to make ScumVM games either. So Source Engine from Valve is proprietary also. It uses C++. I'd actually like to see if any of these actually support Rust. But Rust is so new, I wouldn't be surprised if none of them do. So there is a real argument to actually making a whole new engine to compete with Unity versus using a existing one. Although if you're making a game, you're not going to make a whole new engine just to make one game. It'd have to be a bunch of open source developers who were working on Unity and then decided to get away from it. Noticeably here, Unity, C++, mainly proprietary engine. Pokemon Go, Monument Valley, Call of Duty, Mobile, Beat Saber, Cuphead, Genshin Impact being the big games there. Where Unreal Engine is C++, and it's got Fortnite, Gears of War, and Valorant. Yeah, and then like Visual Paint Pinball as an engine is only going to be good for pinball. There's not a single listed engine here that stands out as being one to move to. Godot is probably as good as the other one. The Stride engine, C# only, is slightly different. I need to figure out what these two columns are, whether the engine itself is programmed in C++ and then the language you program it with is Lua and Squirrel and Python. For the source engine. That's too many assistive engines for the source engine. Python RinPy is visual novel engine that I guess if you wanted to make visual novels and you were a kid learning Python, you could use Python and Pygame to do that. And making a visual novel is not going to be that hard, although finding the art or making the art without stealing it from the internet is going to be difficult still. A good old-fashioned C, not C++ engine. Wow. I don't think Lua is particularly a great one to learn. I don't even know if Python's really a good language to learn. It's just too different from C++ and C# and Rust and all the other languages. C++ by far the most obvious engine to learn, language to learn if you want to program video games, though. Even now, C++ should be something you know backwards and forwards. And then maybe Rust if you want to get ambitious as the second language to learn. But probably C# instead. You can learn C# and C++ basically at the same time, though. It's backward compatible. So really, C# is a good one to consider these days. Of course, what C# is versus what Visual Script is can get fairly confusing because Microsoft tries to make those two things feel like they're the same. There was a G programming language at one point. Yeah, so not a single engine here using Rust yet. Interesting, but not super surprising. I'm supposed to be covering video game news and I got distracted there. Unity has tweaked its new install fees as developers threaten to jump ship. The company has tweaked its policy to counter potential install bombing and clarified how titles on Xbox Game Pass and similar services will be impacted. So yeah, they tried to smooth it over, and in all fairness, maybe this time next week people will have completely forgotten about this controversy, but today it is a big controversy with a lot of articles around it. It's funny, this headline, Xbox Live Gold is regenerating into Xbox Game Pass Core with its 36 titles. Regenerating is, I suppose, a word to use, but I think you are just use turning, less words, less letters, turning into Xbox Game Pass Core, or morphing would be anything. Regenerating implies that it is been diminished in some way. Xbox Live Gold has, and it only has been slightly diminished due to old age, and that by relaunching as Xbox Game Pass Core, it is coming back to its glory days and becoming even better, or as good as it once was, which it definitely doesn't feel like that's the case in this instance. And then we already talked about the PS5 updates. And so that would bring us to the fall list cleanup, but that again didn't work. So we'll skip that. And then we'll just look at all the new games that came out on Steam. Let's see. We have a FMV game called the Isle Tide Hotel, which I always want these games to be good, but they tend not to be. We immediately have an adult game, Sex Story Cuckold Life Episode 6. It's 3D CGI characters with realistic color palettes. Seems like it's a girl and a guy and maybe another guy. Mostly in a bar this time. This is a series that is a visual novel that's getting released fairly quickly. It's $2.24. I wouldn't be surprised if you've got somewhere around 20 minutes of content in it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's no actual animation at all and very little interaction at all at that price. Weirdly though, that does just kind of continue down the path of us seeing a lot of Western adult games and a lot of the same publishers just putting out a new game every week. Although I can really complain that if there's 1 to 3 publishers publishing games in the adult section of Steam, when there's no competition happening, it would either be a case of we get no adult games if they didn't, or we get what they offer if they do. This Logic Art Grimoire, we'd already decided to put on the fall list, so leave it there. We have Souls of War Legions, which doesn't look quite interesting enough for me to want to play it. It's an 8-player online PvP early access game. We have a game called Portals Escape the Infinity, which might be something. We have a hidden object game, which I'll make a YouTube short on. We have a 2D anime visual novel called Cerulean Days. Interesting poses in the girls. It's not just your basic, let's draw the anime girl with her arms to the side. You have one with the arms ahead in front of her smiling. Then you have like a photography pose here and a slightly tilted Dutch angle photo here, then a slightly hands-on hip tilted here. Now I'd say anatomically there's some weirdness here. Again, short neck, kind of long arms, fairly wide hips and fairly big bust for all of that. But yeah, another pose, another angle. You just don't get that in a lot of visual novels. There. Now, again, this is a question about is there any mature content in it, or has this been censored to be put on Steam? Because this is not in the adult section. Although, in fairness, this doesn't feel like this would be a game that really was an adult visual novel. That being said, there is some nudity or sexual content and general mature content. The sub part of this certainly would be just the excessiveness of the adult content, because really any M for mature game like Borderlands probably should have some kind of argument for being in the adult section, but it definitely wouldn't have an excessive amount of like adult sex stuff. Although Borderlands does have an excessive amount of violence and cussing and everything else. I don't think Ninja Party here looks interesting enough. And then Cypher 8, I don't think it's visually polished enough. I am just curating. The amount I curate almost certainly comes down to how many YouTube shorts I have scheduled and how far behind I am. Like, I definitely am more likely to curate when I think there's a ton of YouTube shorts that I'm behind with. I'm gonna say no. You know what? I'm gonna say yes to this. Give it a chance. But yeah, I probably am going to be much more strict, or a little bit more strict at least. Around the idea of when I'm more backlogged. Interesting. This says Dirty War September 11, and it was released September 12th, but it's a video game about the suburbs of the Cold War in South America. So it's not the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks in the United States even, but it almost certainly any day out of the year there is some war that was going on in the history. Plus most wars take a long amount of time, so unless the war can distinctly be described to a specific day, any day would do. Regardless, this just doesn't look polished enough for it to feel like a game worth playing, and you definitely don't want to get your history based on some video game developer who potentially has their own agenda to mislead or give you fake information. Next we have a puzzle game called Stick to the Plan, which does look visually polished enough to justify giving it a follow. Here we have a game called Pumping Station 2, which I think is an asset flip name confusion game for another gas station game that it itself might be an asset flip. Game. One More Gate looks somewhat like a Darkest Dungeon game with a different art style to it, and it does look visually polished enough and it's very positive, so that definitely justifies making a short on it. Noir, Play With Your Food, interactive exploration game of aesthetic food. How much is it? $11.99, and it's on the fall list already, so I already made a short on it. Beat. Increasingly, we're going to see more games that are already on the fall list. I think we can say no to Beat. And that is just because the end of the year people are going to catch up. So we have another 3D CGI adult game called Living in a Brothel. Now, although notably, some of these pictures and some of these models feel a little bit like a whole generation, not just a little bit. They feel a lot better looking. It's not just a single first pass, low effort on the 3D models. Weirdly, it's mostly of the guy though. The guy character, which is showing up a lot in the screenshots, is fairly well designed. The girls are a little bit better, but weirdly I'd say the guys had just more attention to having distinct facial figures and a beard and things like that. The girls are up and down. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Mostly though, this still just looks like a visual novel game with nothing there. There weirdly is a screenshot here where a girl is just kissing the cheek of a guy, and being able to even model that and having her nose crumple up as it touches the side of his face. He kind of has some dead eyes in that, but just doing that level of attempting to animate is more than what most of these do. It seems like you get a variety of girls, and that would be about it. It's weirdly an early access game for $10.19. It's English and Portuguese, Brazil in the language. It looks to me like there is about 10 girls included, one of which is dark skinned, which is a level of variety you often don't see. Although I'd say most of them have fairly big boobs, and most of them are clean shaven, which is not perhaps as varied as you would want. Claims to have quite a lot of things in it. 103 animations, 2,161 high quality renders, a gallery with 92 unlockable images, inventory, shops, posters, secret cards, photo studio mode, smartphone, mini games. That is quite a lot that it's claiming to have for $10.19, and it's quite a lot that's not really being shown in the screenshots. Which that's inherently a problem with adult games, is that they tend to only put screenshots of the adult content, and it leaves you wondering if there is anything more. Blockville, it's a city simulation game. I'm gonna say yes because of these. This feels like a old toy that people might have some nostalgia for. That's about the only reason though I'm saying yes. And then we have Myth Force, which is already on the fall list, and I think I could probably already take it off, but I'm gonna leave it on the fall list just to see if maybe it turns around. I definitely would want this game to, with its different art style, to succeed more, but it doesn't seem like it's going to. Next we have Combat Mission Fortress Italy, which looks like nothing. Then we have Space Pressure 3D Prelude, which would be a Prelude game, so I'm not interested in that. And then we have Mary Skelter Finale, which is not in the adult section, although it potentially should have been, because the original Mary Skelter game did have adult content and then got bullied and censored, I believe, to not having as much adult content in its sequel, and now the third game in the series. So as a dungeon crawler game, it's a lesser product than what I feel like Idea Factory and Compile Heart really wanted to make. But it is on Steam in its form, and I don't think there is an uncensored patch. But yeah, there's, even though we see in the screenshot some characters that are in some lewd outfits, revealing outfits, and innuendo, there's no actual nudity they're claiming in the game at all. Where when you see some of these characters like this, you would kind of expect it. And at a certain level, if you're just wearing a couple of ribbons and you're basically in a bikini, you're only really a step away from being nude anyways. Bike out doesn't look like anything. Let's see. Duelist AV. Notably, we've seen 2 Western 3D CGI games, and only now are we seeing one 2D anime style adult game. And we didn't see any 2D anime style adult games on Monday, so there was a question perhaps if we'd see less because of the Tokyo Game Show for one reason or another. This game is called My Ex-Sister-in-Law, which is probably just a cheating visual novel, and it doesn't feel like there's much here. One blue-haired lady with different backgrounds visual novel. It's selling for $3.59. Yeah. 2 different endings. Very short, about 30 minutes long. And it supports English and Chinese, but not Japanese, so this probably is a Chinese adult game, if anything. I could have actually just shown you all the screenshots on that, too. Here we have a troll joke, politicians fighting each other game. Here we have a game called 3 AM in Leicester. That's how you spell Leicester City in the UK. Or if you're in the West, Leicester. Or Leicester, maybe. The actual game here, though, it's just a foggy nothing from the looks of it. Here we have like a Power Rangers troll clone game in an RPG format. Looks like it's a dungeon crawler RPG game, and it looks terrible. Inherently, having different colored outfits for the characters doesn't really mean anything. Gearhead karting could be something, but could be basically nothing. Noticeably here they have people in these fully covered up outfits that have just been copied and fully covered up helmets. I'll give this a chance, but I imagine it's nothing. Then we have yet another adult game called I Will Obey You Mistress 2, which again is 3D CGI images, although that doesn't inherently mean there's motion. The color palette may be a little bit off from a natural color tone to make it feel a little cartoony. Doesn't really feel anime-ish though. Then you have some like really bad backgrounds around it. It too is selling itself as early access, English only, allegedly with full audio. And yeah, I don't know if there's too much to really say here. There's a device machine involved, and then there's a screenshot of a guy licking the lady's boots, and then her outfit is kind of a goth chick with tattoos. But that's about all I can say about it. It's actually pretty boring screenshots, not showing much, not really making me think there's much there in the first place. Next we have Idle Developer, which, yeah, this is not too far off from the level of quality we see from a lot of the 3D CGI adult games too. It's just, here's a 3D model. I guess the good news with Unity is maybe we'll stop seeing so many people asset flip Unity 3D models, assuming they were ever actually paying for those 3D models and weren't just stealing them, which I imagine at least some small portion of game devs were just stealing the models. And I'm only assuming that those are actually coming from the Unity asset store and not some other asset store like the Unreal asset store. And I'm only assuming that these games aren't going to find a way to just use what they already have over and over again. But it certainly could be for the better if there's a bit more of a barrier to entry to making a video game, to the point where you actually had to have more of a level of skill and more of a level of dedication. Beat Survival here as a game doesn't look like anything. And then Untitled Ghost Game almost certainly is going to be a no. There we have a God of Weapons game. I'll give that a chance. Then we have Escape from Norwood, which feels like it's too much text, just squeezing all the visuals basically into one corner. So I'm going to say no to that. Hard Hero looks like garbage. Gravity Oddity doesn't look that interesting. Access Football 2024. It's probably nothing, but I'll make a YouTube short on it anyways. Here we have a game called I Am Die, D-I-E, where I suppose you're just jumping and platforming as a dice, which that may change how you would move around enough that I'll give it a chance, when there's a decent chance there's nothing really here. Although when you look at the background here, there's a lot of polish here, more than you would think. This might literally be the only one level too. Here we have a tower defense game called Cosmos Siege. Reverse tower defense battle game. The task of each level is to destroy the towers located in the center of the screen. So you're destroying the towers. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's quite enough visual polish there to say yes to that. Cyber Jump, I assume, is a Jump King clone. Yep. Same background for everything. That's going to be a no. Eye of the Artist. It's a 3D puzzle game, it says. Place items where they belong. So it's almost like a reverse hidden object game. I'm going to put that on the fault list to see if people respond to that. And then Greedy Chicken. And we're almost done for today. And it does once again feel like we had one or two 2D anime more style adult games, and so I'm just not sure if we're having some bundling happening here, or if they're holding back on releasing those games until the Tokyo Game Show happens, if Japanese publishers and developers don't want to release games until Tokyo Game Show happens, or if Valve themselves are holding back and soft censoring the release dates, at least, of those games. Although it may just be that there aren't any games. We're getting fewer and fewer adult games of any kind these days. Cozy Trip looks like a walking simulator, and it's kind of a pretty looking environment, but I'm not willing to play in a walking simulator. I didn't even say anything here about Heretic Fork. It might be something of a decent game. Give it a chance. I'm not even making commentary now on Slime Experiments. It's gonna be no. Humanity's Legend Dark Horizon. I think we can go ahead and say no to this too, just because it doesn't have enough heads-up display polish. And then Super Bomberman R2. So, yeah. I guess I have maybe some Yu-Gi-Oh! I should play off screen, and I have some YouTube shorts to make, and I have some scheduling to do, but I need to get back to playing the Blob. But yeah, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.